Hi everyone, and welcome to this Multilingual Matters online event, Ask the Authors Live. I'm Flo from Multilingual Matters, and I'm joined with my colleague Laura, who's in the headphones. She's dealing with the technical side of Zoom for us today. And we're delighted to be joined today by the editors of our Psychology of Language Learning and Teaching book series, Sarah Mercer from the University of Graz, and Stephen Ryan from Waseda University, who will be speaking to the editors of Contemporary Language Motivation Theory, Ali Al-Hoorie, and Peter MacIntyre, about their experiences of putting an edited collection together, as well as the author of Directed Motivational Currents and Language Education, Christine Muir, and her experience of turning a PhD into a book. At the end of the event today, there will be an opportunity for some audience questions, so please do use Zoom's Q&A tool to post any questions about publishing to us during the event. And my colleague Laura will be keeping an eye on submissions, and we'll pick some of them to be answered by our panelists. If you need any immediate clarification of something that the authors have said, you can ask for that, but try and keep your questions to the end of the event if possible, and we'll answer them then. And we'll also be giving you a discount code at the end of the event that you can use to get 50% off any books in the Psychology of Language Learning and Teaching series, so stay tuned for that as well. And now I'm going to hand over to Sarah and Stephen, who will give an introduction to the series before speaking to Ali and Peter. Sarah and Stephen.
Hi, thank you so much, Flo. Thank you, Multilingual Matters, for hosting this event, and thank you to the audience for coming. It's lovely that you took the time to join us. Thank you especially to Ali, Peter, and Christine for taking the time to share their experiences and insights into working in the series. We decided that we'd start by just giving you a little bit of a background to the PLLT series, as we call it, Psychology of Language Learning and Teaching. The reason that the series started was that there was already many good books in the SLA series, but the field was just growing. Some of you may be familiar, we had the Psychology of Language Learning conference in Graz in 2014, and there was a sort of growth of interest in the field of psychology of language learning generally, but also lots of publications in different areas that we kind of felt needed bringing together. That somehow it was great to be able to facilitate the kind of connections between different books, different topic areas, and also have a place where people who were specializing in this area, focusing on this field, could go and know that they would get state-of-the-art, latest research that was being done in these different areas. So our motivation was a kind of practical one in bringing the field together and making work that was being done salient, so that we would be kind of visible as a field, but also able to find the connection to work really easily. But also we wanted for people working in the field to be able to see more easily the connections between different areas of psychology. So the field was very dominated by motivation at the beginning, but it has expanded enormously to incorporate a lot of other areas that it's now easier to find the connections. They're not sort of so fragmented as they were before. Stephen, does that give a fair representation of kind of some of the early motivations of how we started the series?
Yeah, whoops, didn't do it. Yeah, that's very, very much my experience of doing this, and it was that feeling of there must be a place when you're not quite fitting in established series, and there was a clear need for a new place for books and the work that we were doing, and a lot of other people were doing, and that's what I experienced. Do you want me to go on and talk about the actual titles in the series?
We can do, yeah. That would be good to illustrate the kind of things that we're doing.
Yeah, because I think probably the best way to tell you about the series is to show you the contents, and perhaps even to explain what a series is, because I think for many of us in the insiders, we think, yeah, the series. But I remember as a sort of novice researcher myself, hearing other people talking about series and who's an editor of this series, and I was like, what's a series? And for those of you looking to publish, I think I want to tell you about what a series is and why it's important you know this, because it's not just this convenient device for publishers to organize their titles, which it does seem like on the outside. But if you're looking to get your work published, it's important you go to the right place. And a series, the advantage of a series is that it has some, I hate the word to use, expertise, but there's people who know your subject area. And if you're going to the right people, they will understand what you're trying to do. And they also have, and they will understand your aims, they will also be having access to a network of reviewers who will contribute to your work and improve your work. And so if you're going to the wrong series, your book is not going to be realized to its fullest potential. And just to look at what we have available now, I'm going to try and do this screen sharing thing, so bear with me. I hope I don't show anything incorrect. So you should be able to see, I hope. Somebody give me a nod if you can see that. Yep, okay. The titles that we have. And we began, actually, I think, I'm not quite sure, maybe Laura or Flo can give me a nod, that I think we're in reverse chronological order here, are we? The very first book in the series was Language Teacher Psychology, which is actually a edited book with Sarah was the co-editor. And then we started with one, I can't show you, but we have this multilingual, visualizing multilingual lives, which was a really innovative book and looking at methodology. But one of the interesting things is we pushed the boundaries with illustrations on that one and images. And then we have the book we're going to hear about later in a few moments, actually, Contemporary Language Motivation Theory. And then we can see a range of titles here, and not just the topic areas, but also the contexts. And we have teacher psychology, learner psychology, and I think this is this is again Ali's book here, Ali with Phil Hiver, Student Engagement in the Language Classroom. I think that's just about to be published now, which will be the 11th title in our series. And we do have, I think, 3 or 4 more on the way, I think. In next year, we have something about CLIL, the psychological experience of CLIL. And then we have, and so we have a mix of edited titles and monographs. And by looking at what's available here, and if this sort of connects with your own interests, then this is probably the place you should be looking to get your proposals in. Because one of the things you forget, as a beginner, you think the publishing world is trying to stop you publishing. The purpose of this whole review is to block your publication. It's so much the opposite. It's the reverse. We really want you to submit proposals. We really want to get those titles out there. We're on your side and trying to make things better. And I hope that's what the experience Peter and Ali felt when they joined us. And I hope that's how they experienced, but maybe they could tell us something about that themselves. So can we welcome Peter and Ali to the discussion now? And then perhaps Sarah, you want to begin with a question for them?
Yeah, I can do. Thank you, Stephen. Peter and Ali, thank you so much for having contributed your book to the series. It's great to have in the series. It's a monumental landmark publication, hugely important. It's just recently won a prize, which speaks volumes about it. Congratulations to you both for that.
Thank you.
Maybe you want to talk a little bit about where the idea came from and, you know, what brought you to put this collection together.
Ali, would you like me to start, and then you can correct everything that I say that's incorrect? Well, this actually began.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. This began at one of the PLL conferences that Sarah Mercer had mentioned. Actually PLL2, the one in Jyväskylä, Finland, and it was a coffee break, which is where all of the good ideas happen. Coffee breaks and then the dinners afterward are the best place to have good conversations. And Ali and I know each other. He came up and we were talking about the upcoming anniversary of the Gardner and Lambert 1959 motivation article. And it was Ali's idea to put together something that commemorated that article. And I had done a symposium in Canada about 10 years before, commemorating the 50th anniversary. And so we started talking about that over tea and coffee and a few snacks, and the idea began. Ali, did you want to pick it up from there?
Yeah, so I had this idea because, again, as you said, if we go 10 years before that, in 2009, there was a big book by Zoltan Dorni about motivation. It was a big landmark also in the field of motivation. So we're thinking, okay, what about 2019? And that was like 2015 still. And at that conference in Finland, most of the contributors were actually there physically. So we had the chance to go and speak to them face to face and say, Mark Duaeli was there, Rebecca Oxford was there, James Landolf, and most of them were there. When we pitched the idea to them, most of them were interested. And the only exception was Zoltan Dornier was not present at the conference. So he heard about it afterwards. And at that time, I was doing my PhD with him at Nottingham. And I told him the news and I asked him to join the project. He said, he wasn't very interested in it. But then he agreed to write the preface. So that was...
Well, if you wouldn't mind, Ali, let me tell the story. We were at AAAL in Chicago. I think it was Chicago. And Ali and I were at the bottom of the escalator and we saw Zoltan halfway up. And it's like, should we go talk to him? It's like, yeah, let's go. So we ran on the escalator up the top and tracked Zoltan down from behind. We didn't tackle him, which it did occur to me that we should just, grab him, but we didn't. We were very professional about it. And we pitched the idea to him in person. And he was interested at that point. So it's kind of funny because sometimes your contributors come to you almost accidentally. Sometimes it's a flash of an idea that you get. At the last PLL conference, the one in Tokyo, Stephen Ryan organized, one contributor came up to us. We had mentioned the series and we mentioned the book in a talk that we gave. And this author came up and she said that she had just finished a paper and she thought it would fit with the topic of the book. And it's like, okay, we don't know this person, but let's give a conditional, sure, we'll take a look at it, and very cautiously. And it turned out to be a very brilliant piece. So I've seen it quoted several times already, and the book has just come out. So sometimes the authors find you.
Can I ask, so you started with, you had an idea of a book, probably at the beginning it was quite a vague idea. Then can you tell us something about converting this idea into a concrete proposal? What steps did you take?
Ali, did you want to go ahead?
Yeah, so working with Multilingual Matters, things are very flexible. And so at that conference in Finland, Laura was there, if I recall correctly, and we approached her and she said, yeah, that would be interesting. So we wrote up a brief document explaining the rationale of the book and the contributors and the other information, and things were very smooth.
Yeah, the idea, I think the core of the idea is to think about what is the anchor piece, what is the piece that's going to initiate the contributions, and what does that look like and what does that shape? Because those first couple of chapters, you have the introductory chapter which lays out the book, but then if you think about the next piece is that anchor piece, what comes next? And in the case of Ali and I, it was, well, if this is a book about Gardner's theory, let's contact Gardner and see if he'll write the anchor piece. And so from there, your idea begins to take shape and it begins to flourish. And you think, well, okay, if this is the anchor piece, what follows? What comes next? And then you just begin to look at the ideas of how to fill out the whole field rather than just, one chapter or another being disjointed. You kind of think, how does the overview, what would an overview of this whole text look like? How does it represent thinking and theory, methods, controversies that happen in the particular field? And you want to try to capture those if you can. But that anchor piece, I think, is the beginning of the idea.
Yeah. It was great that Gardner himself agreed to, write a piece in that book. So that was great.
Well, it's a fantastic selection of contributors that you managed to get together, and the papers, every chapter is excellent and a very high standard. And do you want to talk a little bit about working with the contributors? So, you know, for example, I know that Laura, Multilingual Matters have got a template for guiding you in your proposal. To what extent did you already know who the authors were at that stage, and then how did you work with them and their pieces? Perhaps sort of that process, maybe.
Well, I think if every piece is going to be different. Every book, every chapter has its own story. With this particular story for this book, Gardner's name carries a lot of weight. He has a lot of friends, and so we contacted some people who just are eminent scholars in the field. Things like people like Meryl Swain, Jim Landhoff, people who've known Gardner over the years, and that was a good connection. That was a good way to convince them to contribute a chapter. So we talk about the excellent scholarship, and a lot of that comes down to the writers. If they already have lots of experience, if they have good standards, and if they're well experienced in the field, then as editors you have a lot less work to do, because they write very well, and they know how to write within the word limit, and they know how to structure the piece, and they know the pieces have to fit together. So having experienced authors is really very beneficial to an editor. But then having the junior authors as well comes along, and they add their own new ideas and new directions. So it really is nice to have a blend. And in choosing the contributors, we did want to have a blend of both experienced and newer scholars in the area to capture the field, the development of the field, but also where is it going? And you think, okay, how might this shape in the future? And so as you think about those kind of things, ideas and contributors start to come to mind. And in our case, I think maybe Ali, you'd agree, it was easy to convince people to contribute to this volume because of who it represents.
Yeah, that was the sell. So there is always a trade-off between having senior contributors and junior contributors. With senior contributors, you won't obviously do a lot of editing, but the trick is to get them to do the work on time, because these people are usually overcommitted. They have so many projects, they have many things working on, and have a comfortable timeline and plan early and give them reminders over time and just plan for it. This helps. So that's
a very good point, Ali, is to communicate regularly with the contributors. Some book projects I've been involved with, you hear from the editors at the beginning, and then as the deadline approaches, they say, okay, where's your chapter? If you can contribute, talk to the contributors over time and let them know how things are progressing, express your enthusiasm for the project. It does help. It keeps people on track, and it reminds the super busy contributors that their deadline is approaching in a very gentle sort of way. So regular communication does seem to help with getting the contributors to come in on time.
So beyond regular communication, which I agree must be so important, were there any other sort of strategies you employed for managing the sort of overall workload, organization of the project?
Ali, do you want to begin?
It was interesting because we didn't have, for this particular project, we didn't have to do a lot of editing because of the experience of the contributors. So it was very smooth, and things were very well. The good thing is that working with Multilingual Matters, they didn't require us to follow their in-house style. So we didn't require the authors to format their chapters and their references and all this work. We just asked them to follow APA, and that's it. And that was the easiest thing.
If you don't mind a story about another Multilingual Matters piece, we had another book that we were working on, and one of the contributors wrote a paper that was maybe 3 or 4 times as large as it should have been. If we asked for 8,000 words, we had almost an encyclopedia that came in. And the editors got together and we decided, like, what are we going to do with this? Because this particular author sent that contribution plus another regular sized one. So we had 2 contributions from the same author. One of them was massive. But then as we read it, we quite liked it. And this is where working with Multilingual Matters is really a beautiful thing, because we told them, you know, as editors, here's what we're facing. Can we have a chapter 3 times the size of the others? And they said, well, you're the editors. If you think it's a good piece, we'll put it in. And so we kept within the overall word limit of the whole book. The book project will have a word limit, and it fit within that. So yeah, the flexibility that you have with Multilingual Matters is actually a very good thing, because it allows you to take an unusual contribution that maybe you don't anticipate as you're putting together the proposal, but you can still react to what the authors send you. And if it's good, and if you like it, and if you think there's a place for it, you can argue for it, and the staff are very receptive.
Okay, I'm conscious of time. We've got a couple of minutes left. Is there anything else you'd like to perhaps contribute comment on in terms of the experience of putting together a proposal, you know, thinking of giving advice to people who are maybe considering an edited collection in our series with Multilingual Matters? Is there any other advice that you would give to them about things that they should bear in mind, things maybe we've not talked about yet?
Yeah, there is one. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, one of the things that we've learned through experience is that there are contributors you know and contributors that you don't know when you begin. So dealing with people you know is different than dealing with people you don't know. So if you already know who you want, who you're inviting, and they've agreed, that's one set of relationships. With people you don't know, maybe you've put out an open call, or maybe people have come in with unsolicited contributions. That's always a little bit more difficult for the editors, because the editors have to work a little bit harder to make sure everything fits, and that it fits in with what your vision of the book should be, because you typically do have a sense of what the overall collection is going to look like. And unsolicited contributions don't necessarily have that on the way in. So sometimes you have to work with authors, and some authors, especially if you don't know them, you don't know how they're going to react to editorial criticism or editorial massaging of their paper. Some people don't react well. And if you don't know them in advance, you may not know how they're going to react to your contributions as an editor. Sarah's smiling. I think she knows what she might have had some experience with this too. Sorry, Ali, I interrupted.
Yeah, one of the things, you know, at a more pragmatic level, in some countries, including Saudi Arabia, edited volumes and book chapters do not count towards promotions. So people would say, why should I do this? Or why should I invest time and money on this? If this is a concern of yours, then the alternative is an authored book, which what Christine is going to talk about in the next part.
Okay. I mean, that was a pretty smooth transition there, Ali. I'm very, that was really well done. Did you practice that? Believe me, audience, that wasn't rehearsed, but it was a really good transition. So I think with that professional, we didn't realize that we had a professional amongst us. We'll move on to Christine here and to talk about the slightly different challenges of an authored book. You there, Christine?
I'm here, yes. Hi.
So do you want to first tell us a little about the topic of your book?
Yeah, absolutely. So like many colleagues working in the field of applied linguistics, my route in was from working for many years as a language teacher. And there are obviously many different research topics sort of being explored across the field that have real pedagogic relevance, that are really relevant to the classroom. But the one that really captured my interest, and that I don't think you can necessarily get that far without in the classroom, was motivation. So having taught many students across many years in many different contexts, what I'd really become interested in wasn't the day-to-day motivation of students so much, but it was about experiences of longer-term motivation, of students who managed to maintain high levels of motivation, of course, with sort of dips and troughs, ups and downs, but over many months and many years that you need to learn a language. So this book is about a very specific kind of long-term motivation. It's about a kind of long-term motivation that definitely isn't the norm with respect to how we tend to engage in longer-term projects. But it explores the really special instances when sort of things seem to fall into place and we get really carried away and swept along with what we're doing, where sort of motivation to achieve a very specific goal somehow takes over everything else that we were perhaps meant to be doing at the time, and we're able to really enjoy the huge progress that we make then towards these goals. And I think one of the reasons as well that it excited me so much is because it's not just related to language learning. We can experience this kind of motivation in any area of our lives. So I started developing these ideas alongside Zoltan Dernier, who was my PhD supervisor, Zana Ibrahim, who was a fellow PhD student at the time at Nottingham as well, Alistair Henry as well. And all these ideas then morph into the notion of DMCs, of directed motivational currents. And they described this very specific, very special motivational experience that was really recognizable to many of us and many of the people that we were talking to. When we started publishing, we started receiving sort of emails from people saying, you know, I've seen this, I recognize this, but it had never really been explored theoretically. So my PhD research, my data collection then went on to investigate two very specific issues that at the time we didn't really have any answers to. So one area of the book then investigates the DMC phenomenon in a global context. It focuses in sort of more tangibly on how widely DMCs are experienced, what context they're experienced in, what it was that triggered them. So how do these experiences begin? So part of the research in the book that I present is about sort of understanding these novel questions relating to the generalizability of DMCs and their wider relevance outside the relatively small number of people that we'd spoken to sort of in the run-up of this. And then the other thing, sort of the other part of the book, the other thing that really excited me about DMC theory right from the outset, and sort of still now sort of thinking about my history as a language teacher, is the pedagogical implications. So what can we learn from this that would help language teachers and language students in the classroom? And there really are tangible sort of implications to this sort of theoretical, this theory. And we had framed them in the past around sort of 7 sort of frameworks for focused interventions that sort of came out previously in a jointly authored book in 2016. And we put forward these 7 sort of templates for running and designing and managing group projects. But in this book, I took it further and was really grateful to have been able to work with 2 absolutely fantastic language teachers. So Jessica Florin and David Leach, to work with one of these project templates and to try out, to sort of see how it would work in practice. And so that's what we did. Working with one of these frameworks, we designed a 5-week project based around a charity fundraising event to try to see whether we could take all of this theory, everything that we've been talking about for all of these years, to try to understand how and sort of whether we could put it to work in the classroom in such a way that we could sort of purposely facilitate this kind of experience for teachers and specifically for students in the classroom. So sort of give away spoilers from the book, that's what happened. I talk there and I sort of reflect on sort of what worked really well, the challenges that we faced. It certainly wasn't all perfect. So the aim of the book definitely isn't to say sort of, yes, we did it, but this is what we learned and this is what we still need to learn as well, sort of going forwards. So I think the is sort of what the book is about then.
Thank you so much for that. And I have to say, Christine, that one of the things that's been important to Stephen and I, we both got backgrounds as language teachers, and one of the things that has been important to us with the series from the start is this psychology is automatically more connected to practice per se because of the topic it tends to be. And it's been wonderful. Your book's fabulous at having really high quality research, a strong theoretical framework, and also that connection to practice, which makes it very special. What was it that influenced your decision to convert your PhD into a book? So what was it that made you say, actually, I want to make this into a book rather than a series or a set of papers?
Yeah, it's a really important question, and there's a huge number of sort of things that influence the decision. I think some of them were sort of more romantic than others, if you like. Some of them were very practical. So I'd just been offered a lectureship here at Nottingham, and delivering this second book, my first sole authored book, was a core part of the commitments that I've made to the school. And it's sort of, I think, impossible to answer a question like this without at least recognizing the pragmatic sort of aspects of publishing that are sort of central to our careers as research active academics. But a more interesting answer is to think about, so why a book and why not a series of articles, which could have been, which would have been the other option. And I think the answer lies perhaps, I wanted to tell more of a story than I would have been able to with a set of journal articles. So the book, as Sarah sort of said as well, it's equally sort of empirically grounded. There's no difference between the rigor of the data in terms of how the collection, analysis, what I put forward to a journal article. But in a book, it allows you to give something extra, something on top of that. So it allows you to tell a fuller story. It allows you to present more fully developed arguments, perhaps because, of course, you have more words to do that. It allows you to bring your readers with you on your sort of research journey in a much more detailed way. Which was just much more sort of attractive and exciting proposition.
Yeah, can I pick up on that, what you talked about, the story element, that you wanted to tell a story, because I think that's sort of very often it's a really important component of a book. Not essential, but it can be an important thing. And so, but that's not essentially in a sort of PhD dissertation. So when you're making this transition from dissertation to book, what kind of challenges did you face? Because I think that's what a lot of looking at the Q&A here, that's what a lot of the people here are really interested, this sort of the challenges of moving from a PhD thesis to a book itself.
Absolutely, they're really different things, aren't they? Sort of most markedly, perhaps, the very different audiences. We write them for very different reasons, don't we? So we write a PhD ultimately to get our doctorate. That's why we write it. We write it with our examiners in mind, just because we know who they are. It has a very specific purpose, and because of that, there's very specific things that we need to demonstrate as part of a PhD to be awarded that doctorate. So we have to demonstrate, for example, we're very aware of the history of our respective fields, and we work very, very hard to become experts in a very specific area of study, which stands us in excellent stead, to be able to defend in our PhD vivas. But it's a very, very narrow slice of what's otherwise, always a much broader field. And so, and I think sort of related to this as well, and thinking about the challenges, by the time I started thinking about developing a book proposal and turning the PhD into a book, I'd already been immersed in this research for really a long time. So the challenge of needing to frame the book in a way that be relevant and exciting to more people than just my examiners, and to keep me excited and to keep me engaged with this was another sort of challenge, sort of tied up in this same issue. It perhaps wasn't as big an issue as I thought it was at the time, maybe, in terms of thinking, okay, I need to start again and write something that is completely new with a different story, something that's going to be more relevant, more sort of accessible to more people. So I was really lucky. I had a really positive experience throughout the PhD, and I sort of really believed that the research that I conducted was really exciting, was really something that people would want to know about. Around sort of about the same time that the research was recognised by PLLT, and it was awarded the dissertation prize in 2018. It was a massive honour, and it was sort of unexpected, but it was sort of really encouraging in dealing with another sort of very specific challenge of this transition. So I'd published previously with colleagues, book chapters, journals, even a jointly authored book, always with my PhD supervisor as one of the co-authors. And I really enjoy working collaboratively, I still do now, but sort of the recognition, the move to establishing yourself as an independent researcher in your own right. Some of this is sort of very specific to my experience, but certainly that challenge of opening up the boundaries of who you're writing to and who you are, and presenting yourself to the world sort of almost as an independent researcher, that was definitely sort of another challenge that came along with everything.
I think that's really important to talk about, making that transition, finding your own voice and your confidence as a writer to do this independently. And I think probably one of the most important messages is also this idea that you think about your audience, that the audience for a PhD is very different to the audience if you're writing a book. And I know that from our experience of getting proposals, that's probably one of the biggest challenges that authors face. Christine, what other practical steps did you kind of go through? So once you sort of made that decision for yourself that you wanted to convert this into a book, what kind of steps did you go through then? What happened next?
So I had to spend quite a lot of time thinking about this, going back, thinking sort of all these years ago, okay, how did I start? What did I do first? So I think in terms of first steps, instead of writing anything, I would talk to as many people as you can. Talk to people who have published books before, talk about the process, what advice can you get from them in terms of sort of reframing that. You don't need to do it sort of on your own in that. Talk about, see if you can read other people's book proposals. Talk to, you know, I know both the series editors sort of informally before I, you know, submitted the proposal. I spoke to the Multilingual Matters as well, the team there. So I think lots of drafts of everything with sort of the same with everything that we do. And then so you submit the book proposal, then sort of feedback on the proposal. I think at that point then I was offered the contract, so I sort of signed, and then everything went quiet, and I was like, oh, this is when I have to write the book now. This is when it happens, when the magic is meant to happen. So after all of that, I submitted the draft submission, reviewed both by the series editors and by external reviewer as well. And I was really lucky that the feedback that I received at this stage was hugely productive. It was really thoughtful in terms of really positive about sort of the book as a whole, but in terms of areas to sort of think about, areas to go back, think about reframing, or just sort of different opinions perhaps that I hadn't thought about, or I had positioned sort of slightly differently. So that's a really important stage, and one that I was really lucky that I had very sort of productive, very sort of useful feedback at that stage. Then lots of, you know, revision, putting that in, resubmitting that revised manuscript, and then many stages of copy editing, many stages of proofreading that for me were hands down the most stressful part of the whole thing. Sort of thinking that this was it. All of these years of the PhD, all of these years of writing the book, I couldn't change anything. This was sort of that cutoff moment. So I sort of got through that somehow or other, chose the image, inviting sort of reviews for the cover, and then you just need to sort of wait for a knock at the door with the hard copies. I may have forgotten things you can fill in, but that's all I can remember.
I think the point you made about the feedback is a really interesting one, because I think in your early career that's one of the most intimidating, the most sort of aspects of the publishing process, that feedback can be so terrifying, and so it can really do a lot of harm to your self-esteem. And what kind of advice would you give to somebody who's at that stage now of, you know, I want to submit my proposal, I want to make this into a book, but I don't know if I can, I'm ready for this. What kind of, would you, you know, just the simple advice points, what would you give to somebody at this stage now? Yeah, so I just say, don't do it.
No, do it, definitely. Do it somewhere like Multilingual Matters, somewhere like a series like this with a really sort of encouraging, you know, sort of supportive team around you. That makes a massive sort of difference. I think one of the things that sort of, you know, even though it might be a sole authored book, remember you're not writing it alone. You know, get advice, talk to people, ask people to read chapters, ask people to read extracts, you know, remember who the people are that read it, and, you know, hang on to them. You know, those friends are sort of worth everything, you know, as you sort of carry on. So I think that was something that sort of really sort of stuck with me. Even though this is a sole authored book, I certainly didn't do it alone. There's a lot of people that contributed, that supported, that without whom, you know, it certainly wouldn't have got to this point at all. And so sort of related to that, you sort of make sure you have people, you know, will always be in your corner maybe. So one thing I did very early on, I told a friend that whatever happens over the coming years, however dire things look, however unlikely, you know, that he thought it was, that I would submit to, that I'd be able to follow through, I would need you to just pretend and never show a moment's hesitation, a moment's doubt, to never sort of do anything. And he didn't for years and years. It was certainly a joke at the beginning, became very important, very serious later on. I've never asked how many times he was lying. Maybe he's an excellent liar. I don't think I want to know. But certainly that was something that kept me going for a long time, that I really valued. So I think even though you're doing it on your own, like the PhD is allowing you to write on your own, but actually there are always people around you. So sort of don't use them, but, you know, sort of make the most of that.
I think that's such an important thing. I'm really glad that you said that. I'm really glad you had such a positive experience in the community around you. But also, I think that's something that I can say from my experience of working with Multilingual Matters, is that there is a fantastic community at Multilingual Matters. They are very special. I'm going to make Flo and Laura a little bit embarrassed now, but This is a very special place to be connected with. It's a very special team of people. They really care for their authors and for the publications. They really look after everybody. And you're not on your own in this process. As always, I mean, you can always reach out to Stephen and I, obviously, but there's also a whole team at Multilingual Matters who you can connect with if you've got questions, who you can reach out to. And it's a very supportive community, I think.
Yeah.
I'm very conscious of time. Flo, I think I'm on time.
Yeah, no, I think you're fine. Maybe like another 5 minutes and then we move on if you need it, and then we can move on to Q&A or...
Okay, I'll do one more question, Christine.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you would want to add in terms of advice about your experiences of putting this book together, how it feels now that it's done and completed? Any advice or comments that we've not mentioned, perhaps, that you'd like to comment on?
In terms of how it feels very surreal. I mean, I have one sort of sat here and it just feels ridiculous to be looking at it, that after all of these years, it's out, that it's there. I mean, it's a good feeling, I think, but it's certainly very sort of surreal, something to have sort of worked on for so long. I think to reiterate as well, Stephen's point from the beginning about sort of picking the right series for you. And actually, I feel sort of really proud to have this book come out within the PLLT series. You know, clearly talking to Ali and Peter, you know, some extraordinary research sort of published in it, and sort of to have people that really sort of believe in the work and that sort of sits well with other things in the same series, that's really sort of important. So sort of congratulations to you, sort of Sarah and Stephen. It's a really exciting series. Yeah, I'll just then finish by sort of echoing Sarah's words to Multilingual Matters as well. It's, you know, I really sort of grateful for the whole team. And I really value that it's a sort of relatively sort of small team, but such a core central team. So I've really enjoyed getting to know sort of members of the team, particularly Laura, sort of over the years. You know, many things have sort of happened outside of, so it's been lovely to sort of meet you, but not meet you sort of all of these years. But sort of always remaining sort of thoughtlessly professional and supportive and sort of always there. So a massive thank you as well to Multilingual Matters, and of course for them for hosting the event here today as well.
Thank you. That's very nice to hear. I think we've got quite a lot of questions to get through, so I think we should probably start on some of those. I've got one. Maybe we could go to Peter for this one initially, and then anyone is welcome to chip in if they want to. It is from Jonathan Schachter, and he says, how do you decide whether to submit a piece to an academic journal or mould it into a chapter for an edited collection? How do you decide which one to go for?
That is a good question. And Ali had mentioned something earlier, and Christine as well, about the idea, you have to be pragmatic about it in your own career as well. If you're early in your career, it's probably more important than later. Later you have more freedom. But early in your career, you want to make sure you know what the unwritten or even written rules are for your institution. So if they value journal articles but don't much value edited collections, you need to know that. So that will probably shape your thinking in terms of your initial appointment. But after that, if you have the luxury of time, it may be better to think about, what does the piece need? Does the piece need 30 or 40,000 words to really flesh it out? In that case, you're not going to do a journal article. If you need that much space to really dig into the details, like Christine was talking about, to really add all of that value, then yeah, you should be thinking about a book project. Because when you start to trim it down, you may lose that quality that you're looking for. You may lose the message because you have to trim it so much for a journal article. But there are other projects that fit very well with journal articles. It's just exactly the right format. So a combination of pragmatics in terms of your position, your appointment, but also in terms of what the research needs to really flesh it out. There's no sense publishing half a project as an article, because the reviewers will see that there's something missing. So it really is a matter of finding the right fit for the format, but in addition to your own situation.
Thanks, Peter. I don't know if anyone else has anything to add to that. No, happy.
I mean, could I just add that I think the quality of the editorial feedback you may get a more supportive attitude from being as part of a book project rather than a particular major journal. You might get great feedback from a major journal, but it's more, in my experience anyway, it's more hit and miss in that area. With a book, you're on the same team. and it feels like you're on a team a lot of the time.
I think I would also go back to what Stephen said at the beginning, where because this is the PLLT series, you know that you're going to have people who understand psychology of language learning. And you know that you're going to have reviewers and people involved in the process who are aware of what that means working in such an interdisciplinary space.
Okay. Thanks.
So
okay.
one more thing that's actually important here is it depends on the nature and the content of your piece. Generally speaking, despite some exceptions, empirical papers should go to journals. Theoretical papers and reflections and other things are more suited because journals don't like these things anyway. So this would be more for edited volumes. So there are many exceptions, but if it's an empirical paper, and as Peter said, if you're an early career scholar, then maybe it's a journal.
Thanks, Ali. I think this question maybe is one for Christine. How did you go about structuring the time between signing the contract and submitting the manuscript?
Oh, that's a good question. You know, I don't know how I structured the time. I suppose I came at it sort of fresh from my PhD, if you will. So in a sense, maybe nothing much changed. So I carried on reading, like in the sense like there wasn't a period of time where the pressure lifted and I went away and I sort of relaxed. I sort of continued at that sort of rate. I think maybe in terms of sort of structuring time, it was related to how I was structuring the book. So it was looking at, so how do I change that audience? What do I want in there? So are there things I want in the book that aren't in my PhD, and what's in my PhD that isn't in the book? And then I think I looked at then split that down into sections or different parts of the book. So there's sort of an introductory part that I can't remember if I worked on them sort of one after the other, but I think certainly they were sort of jumping around. But there was one part of the book at the beginning that sort of lays out lots of the sort of theoretical basis for things I then later go on to discuss. And so I began there to think, okay, what do I want? What do I want to keep? There's a lot from my PhD that I got rid of, I didn't keep in, that was demonstrating that I knew where the field began and the stages that it had gone through. I knew how we'd got, you know, how we found ourselves here from where we were. And so all of that went, okay, well, that's gone. What needs to go in there instead? And then I looked at it part by part. I think then I looked at the study looking at sort of the wider generalizability, the sort of wider relevance. I looked at that part. I looked at that as a whole. And then I looked at the final part, looking at that study. I looked at that as a whole. So rather than looking at it as a book, I suppose, I split it down into more manageable sections. And then there's a final part at the end, sort of drawing everything together from all of the three sort of beginnings, and then putting lots in that final part, developing those ideas on in ways that they hadn't then been in my thesis, in my PhD. So in terms of structuring time, I suppose I structured it around the book and looked for smaller wholes that I could tell a story of those wholes, and then looked at, okay, how can I bring them together? But of course, while working on each of them, also bearing in mind how they connected to each of the other parts as well.
Okay, thanks, Christine. We've got another question.
Just to jump in, just another thing.
Yeah, of course you can.
Because I think this is important, you know. Being an academic is a career, and you really have to pay the price in terms of time and commitment and the effort you have to put in. You know, you cannot do it casually. And you need to have in the back of your mind that there will be a lot of effort and time devoted to whatever project you going to be engaged in. When I had the contract with Multilingual Matters, I think it was 2015. In that year, I had 2 book contracts, one for this edited volume and the other one for the research methods book with Phil Hyber. And I was still doing my PhD at the time. So I had to devote a lot of time, a lot of energy on it, and the book appeared like we finished it, I think, in 2019. There was a question about the time. And so between end of 2015 to 2019, so it's about that range. So yeah, you have to put in a lot of effort. It will be difficult if you don't have self-discipline and time management.
Thanks, Ali. This question, we don't have a name for who it's from, but I think it can go out to everybody. What is the best way to find a research group that has the same research interests as yours, i.e. researchers to collaborate with in writing books? What's the best way to find them?
Anybody want to mention iApple? Can I mention iApple? So there is also, and Multilingual Matters has worked closely. There's the International Association of the Psychology of Language Learning. So it's I don't know if we can write it in the chat box, IAPLL. And that's the association that also has a conference every 2 years. Obviously, there's been a little bit of a hiatus this year, but we're hoping, we're staying positive, it will be next year. And that's a fabulous place to meet people. And you heard that Peter and Ali actually had their conversation about their collection at that conference. So that association is a discourse space on social media, but as an association. And also it has a regular conference, and that's the best way to network with people who are working in PLL, people who are working in the field, showcase your own work and have those kind of conversations exactly as Peter said. So that would be one suggestion perhaps, but the others probably have other ideas.
If I could just maybe add to that, the importance of going to conferences, if you're able to do that. That's where you do meet a lot of the people. You go up to them after their session, you have lunch with them, invite for coffee. But in addition to that, don't forget that the publishers often will have displays. And that's where you can have these very informal conversations. And we are all on the same team, and that approach will come through. If you meet Laura Longworth or some of the other staff, team at Multilingual Matters, they will shepherd you through the process. They will help you. And it's always great if you can meet them one-on-one in person, if you need a longer meeting, schedule something, but just go up to the book table at these conferences. And that's a very good place to meet the team behind the publishing house.
Okay.
So one more thing, again, not everybody can travel to conferences. Let's be pragmatic again. But we have social media now. Now, the first thing that came to my mind when I heard this question was there is a Facebook group called Research Methods for Applied Linguistics, or something like this. So this is where people post questions, see each other, see the latest things. So consider joining that group.
Thanks, Ali.
Can I just
sorry,
say,
yeah, go on, Stephen.
Just to follow on from what Ali was saying, just be proactive about it. Don't sit back and wait. I actually got to meet Sarah. I can't remember, but I don't know, you emailed me or I emailed you. I don't remember. And if you're looking for somebody, if you're looking to make contact, there's somebody out there who's looking for you as well. And just look. You'll find people if you make the efforts.
Great, thanks, Stephen. This one is for Christine. What are your specific top tips to turn a PhD into a book?
My specific top tips. I'm sure that other speakers can jump in at the end as well with their specific top tips. I think audience. I think it's all about audience. This is a really big part of this. You're changing who you're writing it to, and you're changing why you're writing it. So you want to try to, sometimes PhD titles are quite specific. So you also want to think about the title of your book. So how are you going to make it? So if imagine at a conference or sort of in an online shop, if somebody's scrolling, there's a huge number of books, a huge number of book titles. They're going to perhaps pause for only a moment on yours. So it's about finding something that is able to sort of catch the attention of the most number of people as possible, perhaps. So I think that sort of packaging is really important, and it's perhaps even the most important, because everything else will hinge on that, will come from that. So then what you put in the book, what you keep, what you develop, what you change from your PhD will depend on who you're writing it to. And I think, again, use people, talk to people. So either at conferences or via email, look for sort of book series, think about who you read, what books, have a look at what series they come from, and then look at what other books are in that series and use that to try to understand where your research could be best placed, who you sort of most want to submit it to maybe, and then just start writing those emails. There's nothing at all to lose from writing sort of a short hello, maybe you won't get a response, maybe it will be a no, but absolutely nothing is lost from sending a friendly, this is who I am, this is what I'm interested in doing, would this be something? And so I think that's sort of something as well. Don't be afraid to it, be open, be proactive as well, like Stephen said, go looking, don't wait for it to fall, but sort of look at what you want to achieve, and if you can imagine what that is in terms of what series you want it to fit in, and how that will look at the end, and that will sort of help you understand, okay, what do I need to do to be able to get to this point?
One thing that's related to important tips about this. Now, if you write a book, obviously, you will need to read a lot of things, write things. Now, whether you like it or not, you will forget things. If you read 20 papers or 30 papers, if you go back to paper one and read it again after some time, you will notice that it's as if you are reading it for the first time. You will forget. Now, when I started my PhD with Zoltan Dornier, the first meeting with him, the first supervisory meeting, the first thing that he said to me was about how to organize your notes. You have to take notes and organize them. You cannot be a serious researcher if you don't have a good system to manage your notes, because you will forget. You will read things and forget, and then read things and forget. So some people like to have notes in the traditional way. They have papers and cards and things. Some people have, more technical sides, like in Word documents. Others go to some software like Evernote and OneNote. But these are different ways. You need to find a system that you are comfortable with. Take notes and go back to them later.
Thanks. I'm just going to rush quickly through we've got 2 more questions left, and I'm just conscious of the time. This one is for Peter and Ali. Relating to co-authoring and co-editing books, how did you and your co-editor in this case handle dividing tasks and roles?
I think the beginning, you assess your own strengths and weaknesses. And in my case, it takes a long time for the weaknesses. So Ali is actually very good in areas which I struggle with. So structuring time, for example, something Ali is much better at than I am. So Ali would take the lead on those kind of things. But then, you do find your own strengths, and you have to admit to yourself your own weaknesses. And if you find a partner that can compensate or take some of those tasks that you prefer not to do or are not very good at doing, that helps a tremendous amount. And if you can agree on that at the beginning, you're 80% of the way there.
Ali, do you have anything to add to that?
There are, 2 different ways, I guess, to manage things. You can split the project into 2 parts and then work independently on them. So if it's an edited volume, there are, let's say, 10 chapters. One editor will take care of 5 and the other will take the others. Or you can do different things. One will focus on the reviews and one will focus on some other things. So you can think about the best way suitable for you.
Great, thanks very much. And then I think we'll just end this with a question for the series editors, so Sarah and Stephen. What are your top tips for how to prepare a successful proposal as an early career academic?
Do you want to start?
You want to? I'll say my part. I think, being prepared, and as Christine said, thinking about your audience and thinking about who you're writing for and why you're writing, and just this proposal stage is not you're going to get feedback on this. You're going to get this isn't the end. So my top tip number 1 would be actually get a proposal underway. Don't wait for it. Don't think this is going to be perfect. Be prepared to have your ideas out there and be prepared to respond to feedback. That's because I'm looking at 1 minute here. So Sarah, you have 1 minute.
Yeah, me in 1 minute. So I think it's I think carefully in your proposal what you want to achieve. Think about what is going to make your book stand out. It's got to have a kind of purpose and a message. It doesn't, like Stephen said, have to be perfect, the proposal. We can, once we've got something to work with, but you do need to have that kernel of an idea. There needs to be something there that means it's worth pursuing, that's worth taking further to develop it into a book. So think about your message, what it is you want to get across, and think about what gap it is in the field that you're filling, and why this is worth making into a book. And if you can get over those arguments about what is special about this topic or this study or this book, and what gap it fits, and why it deserves to be a book and not just a paper, if you can get those two big things across, then you're very much well on the way to having a successful proposal.
Great, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm afraid that is really all we've got time for today, but thank you so much to all the panelists for joining us from various different time zones, and to all of you for watching at home. And if you'd like to buy any of the books in the PLLT series, you can get 50% off with the code PLLT50 on our website. Thanks very much for joining us, and have a good rest of your day.